There's a game that had a perfect opportunity to dominate Battlefield and was actually a good enough title for that, but it miserably failed twice in the exact same hilarious way and now can possibly go under the radar forever. WW3 is a case study for every other developer on why you don't want to overestimate yourself, or on how you can fail a game that could not have realistically failed. It was introduced for the first time back in May 2018 with a teaser video, but got actual traction only a few months later in August and October after releasing the gameplay and release trailers. After those, people understood what the game was and almost instantly started calling it the ultimate Battlefield killer, and it was actually looking like it could be the case, since the last game in the Battlefield franchise at that time was Battlefield 5, which had not yet released but wasn't accepted well after the trailer. The fans wanted to have modern day action, yet they got another game set in World War II. Everyone wanted something like Battlefield 3 or 4, and the setting wasn't the only problem with Battlefield 5, because the trailer pretty much became controversial for the reasons I'm not gonna talk about here, but just keep in mind that the game was really far from usual success. And during all the drama, people saw the game, World War III, fresh out of nowhere, offering pretty much everything the Battlefield fans could dream of. It was set in the current years, you had real-life locations straight from the capital cities, one-to-one copies, you had good infantry action, you had tanks. It's really easier to state what wasn't there. People loved this game. Lots of positive comments and a lot of optimism, even though the game was coming out in early access and was developed by a small Polish studio, the Farm 51, which didn't really have any successful titles before this one. They went with a perfect setup for a perfect game, and it seemed like it was going just right so far. Then, in October 2018, the game went live. 11,000 players went to download the game all at once. Everyone is excited, the Battlefield killer is right around the corner, and what followed is probably one of the most hilarious release fails that have ever happened in video game history. People just couldn't comfortably download the game.
I want the fucking, the game's updating right now, boys. I don't know what's happening. Yeah, time remaining, more than 1 year.
First, you had to download their launcher, which meant you had to use their download servers to get the game, and these servers basically died from the overload. Too many people started downloading, and everyone had the lowest speeds possible. And even if you somehow managed to get the game on your PC, it still didn't mean you could play it, because the multiplayer servers died too. You couldn't even get to the main menu, you had infinite connection problems, and it doesn't end. Even if you somehow got into a match, you had terrible optimization issues and server lags, FPS drops, high CPU and GPU usage. For instance, the GPU was around 80% in use, even when you were loading the main menu, so you can imagine what it was like in the game itself. And the saddest part was that the game was actually real, just like in the gameplay trailers, and it was pretty fun if you managed to play it, but the technical issues on the release and after it just didn't let you enjoy it, let alone the fact that you had to pay $30 for the game that didn't really work that well. And yes, you can say that it was made by a small studio, but there is no actual way they couldn't at least get the service done right. They even had publishers who could probably sponsor that. Maybe if people could at least download and get into the game, it wouldn't go as bad as it did. The only issue you would have is bad optimization. After this disastrous release, the game started to slowly die. The peak online went from 11,000 on release to around 100 people. The developers did actually work on the game and they fixed most of the main problems, added new content such as guns and maps, but it doesn't do that much when you basically lost all the player base and their trust. Some people defended the game, saying that it's only early access, that the devs themselves said they didn't expect such amounts of people wanting to play, but we all understand that it's bullshit, considering the game had gotten hundreds of thousands of views on the trailers and a huge amount of people eagerly waiting for the game. It could have been prevented, but for some reason that we can't know, it wasn't. Even considering it was that way, you just couldn't ask for $30 and not let the people play for several days because you decided to have your own launcher instead of using Steam. Then, in around 2021, the game got a publisher of My Games, who had a big chunk of the Russian video game market under their wing. With their help, the devs tried to reboot the game. Firstly, they had a closed beta test for those who bought the original game, and then started selling access to the beta just like they did on the first occasion. The game was pretty different from what it was before, but it was definitely better, even though it started slowly abandoning the hardcore realism route that it initially had. Then, in 2022, the game went open beta, free to play this time. It peaked 11,000 people again. And guess what happened? Considering that the publishers forced their own shitty launcher in and had people download the game peer-to-peer like a torrent. Yes, the same goddamn issues happened just like in 2018. You had to wait an eternity to download the game, then you had an eternal queue to even launch it, and when you got into the game after waiting for hours, you had an unfixable error that didn't let you pass the loading screen. Because guess what? They had those shitty servers that died again. A video that shows potential fixes to it has 20,000 views. This how big these problems were. And just like in 2018, the game itself was good enough. Everyone loved the gameplay. If you don't count the lack of content like maps and game modes, the unbearable server issues, the game is actually good to go. But those issues alone just couldn't let you even play it. Twice. They did it fucking twice. People who defended the game back in 2018 now switched sides and bombarded the Steam reviews with everyone else. And just like that, the game died again. Low player counts besides the devs trying to keep the game alive by updating it, and it's been like this up to this day. I mean, compared to the years after the 2018 release, where all you had were empty servers, you can actually play some matches today. There are some people playing, but who knows for how long that will be, especially considering that the original developers stepped off the project, and it is now under some other studio's wings. They say that they don't have plans on shutting the game down, but who knows if that's true or not, considering that every single day the player count drops, and there's nothing much that can stop the game from hitting its rock bottom. You lost your trust in the first release, people still believed you the second time, and you failed the same exact way. It's sad. I'm talking as an actual fan of the game, as a person who was among those excited Battlefield players back in 2018, and as a person who experienced all the release failures. I convinced my friends to download the game with me to play it, only to sit with them trying to get past the loading screen for hours, while they were asking me what a piece of shit I recommended them. The game in its core is actually good. It did what people loved Battlefield for, had their own way of doing it by making it more hardcore, even though they went a different route the second time. The maps, man, I love the level design of this game. You could literally fight on grounds that you walked on in real life, and it was all beautiful. The maps are probably my favorite part of this game. But nevertheless, you just can't ignore everything I talked about in this video. People suffered those issues for days on days and it wasn't getting fixed. So, the game ultimately got what it deserved. On the other hand, we got games like BattleBit, who learned from that and had immense resources going into only testing the servers for the launch day. And as many of you might know, it did actually succeed. This was the miserable story of World War III. Consider subscribing if you want more content on video games and possibly other topics that I find interesting. If you want to support me, you can sub to my Patreon to also get early access to the videos. You can also join my Discord server to engage with other viewers and me. See you next time.